So let's talk a little bit about what embodiment is first. Here are two dictionary definitions of embodiment, and I'll pause for a moment and allow you to read them. And here's how I think about embodiment. Embodiment is a dynamic and integrated awareness of our inner experience. So our awareness of our emotions, our sensations, our thoughts, and our biases, as well as our outer experience, what's happening in our environment, what context are we in, what physical space are we in, who's around us, and how these experiences impact and are felt in the body. So when we practice embodiment, we're aware of our thoughts, we are also aware of what's happening around us, and we're aware of how both of those things are impacting our physical experience in our body. This is important because our bodies have a lot to tell us about what's going on. And if we can start to connect in with our bodies more, we're much more aware and we're able to feel better and be much more grounded. This is a quote from Margaret Wheatley, which I like a lot, that talks about why this embodiment, this awareness is so important. So she says, every one of us constructs a world and then lives inside our personal creation. Without training, we cannot see the richness of information that the world offers us. With practice, we learn to experience moments of direct perception, free of our filters and bias. And as we take in more of the world, our habitual filters lose their grip. Our actions become wiser, our compassion deepens, and our commitment strengthens. So Margaret Wheatley does a lot of work coaching educational leaders. She's also a longtime mindfulness practitioner. And what she's saying here is that embodied people, when we are self-aware, when we have that increased self-awareness, we're aware of all the different ways that we're experiencing the world based on our past. And we'll talk a little bit about that when we get to the 3 I's. But that when we're not aware of all the influences that shape how we're showing up in the world or how we're experiencing things, then it's a little bit like we're going through the world blind. But if we practice that increased emotional intelligence, that increased self-awareness and embodiment, then suddenly we can see the world more clearly, and that allows us to act differently in the world. So a quick review of why embodiment is important before we move on, because I know I'm throwing a lot of terms out there at you. First, mindfulness leads to awareness. So through practicing mindfulness, we develop a greater awareness of our thoughts and our bodily sensations. This awareness leads to embodiment. So when we are more aware of our thoughts and feelings, we make wiser, kinder, and more informed decisions. And that leads to improved sense of well-being and improved relationships. And embodiment leads to inclusion. Over time, we're able to tap into this increased awareness on the spot, allowing us to create more inclusive and nurturing classroom environments. So this is why embodiment is important. Here's another reason why it's important. So again, I was talking a little bit about how as educators, when we're not aware, we can, through our own biases and thoughts, create unsafe environments because we're not aware of our thoughts and our reactions and how that's influencing us. That's one way. The other reason why embodiment is important is because it matters how educators feel in the classroom. As humans, we're a part of the mammalian nervous system, which is a collective nervous system. And basically what that means is subconsciously we pick up on and react to the cues of the people around us. Many of us have heard this, but a part of our brain all the time is scanning for safety. It's a subconscious part of our brain, and we're scanning in our environment for safety all the time. This was useful during early stages of human development, when we were living more in the environment and in the wild, and we needed to have some awareness of our physical safety and well-being so that we could continue to survive. So while we were picking berries or hunting for animals, a part of our brain was paying attention and scanning our environment to make sure that there weren't any threats that we didn't see. When we experienced those threats, we sensed a mountain lion behind us or a bear or whatever it is that was going to attack us. That part of our brain would trigger what's called the fight, flight, freeze response, which basically means that it would shut off the thinking or logical part of our brain and ready ourselves for survival, either to help us to fight, to give us a surge of adrenaline so that we are able to fight and defend ourselves, to freeze, which basically means to stop altogether and not move in order to take care of ourselves, or to flee, which basically means to leave, to run off as fast as possible. So when the fight, flight, freeze response is triggered, our thinking brain shuts down. Now, while that was really useful during early days as humans when we were trying to survive in the wild, that response still happens today, but it happens when we sense threats to ourselves based on other things. Like for students, if your teacher's in a bad mood, when they come into the classroom, that will send the kids into fight, flight, freeze response. Even if you're smiling on the outside, if you have this seething level of anger or frustration right underneath the surface, our kids aren't fooled. At least their subconscious minds aren't fooled. And they send their kids into that freeze response, fight, flight, freeze response. As a teacher, I discovered this. I didn't know what to attribute it to, but I definitely discovered this early on in my career. I remember so clearly one day I was just in a terrible mood. I had woken up in a bad mood. I had some things on my mind. I was dealing with some stuff in my personal life. And I went to the classroom, and I remember thinking, all I want today is for things to go well and for me to be able to be calm and happy and just to get through the day. And of course, my students picked up on that mood. They picked up on how I was feeling, and the day was terrible. The kids that sometimes are on the edge of having behavior problems, of course, they had big behavior problems. Things broke down. Kids got into fights. It was all the things happened that I didn't want to have happen on that day. At the time, I didn't know what it was, but I did understand that there was this direct relationship between my mood and what happened in the classroom. Now I understand it's this collective nervous system. So when we as the educators aren't doing well, then we tend to impact what's happening to our students. Our students respond subconsciously, and they shut down and go into fight, flight, freeze response. So that's the hard side of that. The good side of that is when we're calm and regulated, so when we're embodied educators, when we're practicing mindfulness and we're aware and we're able to regulate ourselves and our emotions more, the kids entrain on that as well. So if we're in a bad mood, we can have things go badly, but we're in a good mood when we feel stable and calm, the kids learn to match that also. So through just our own energy and our own ability to maintain ourselves, we are able to change the environment in the room. In other words, when we use mindfulness to modulate our body's stress response while we're working with kids, and we can stay in that window of tolerance or in that ability to stay grounded and calm and regulated, when we can be embodied in that way, then our nervous system becomes the intervention in the classroom. Kids entrain to our nervous system and it helps them to calm down and regulate their emotions as well. So it goes either way. It's going to happen whether we practice mindfulness or not. We might as well practice mindfulness because it will help us to be more effective in creating safe and inclusive and calm classroom environments, which in turn will help us to do our jobs better. So it's a win-win all around.